What is going on, fellow Guardians? We are currently 4 days into Season 14, the season of the Splicer. A lot of new weapons have been released this season, and today we're going to be reviewing the weapons that are featured in the new seasonal activity, Override. We're going to immediately be jumping straight into the weapon review, starting out with the new pulse rifle, the Grid Skipper. This is a primary weapon that will sit in your energy slot, dealing void damage as is elemental damage, but before we actually get into analyzing a bunch of these weapons, we're going to take a look at some of the new perks that have been introduced into the game. One of the new perks has been Tunnel Vision, which is reloading after defeating a target will increase your target acquisition as well as your ADS speed for a short duration of time. Next is the perk Heating Up. Final blows with the weapon will increase your accuracy and stability and also improve the weapon's vertical recoil. And we have another one that is Adrenaline Junkie. Grenade final blows will grant bonus damage and handling for a moderate amount of time. Now that we have those out of the way, we can go ahead and take a look at what perks are going to be optimal for this weapon. As you're going to take a look at the third slot, you're going to notice that not a lot of the perks are going to actually improve the performance of this weapon very much, but personally I think primarily you're going to be better off using Heating Up, Killing Wind, and Tunnel Vision, mainly because they're extremely reliable and they're going to be the most consistent. In my personal opinion, Heating Up is going to be the absolute best one that you can get in the third slot, as it will help you increase your accuracy and stability just by getting kills with the weapon in general. Moving over to the fourth slot, we're going to see the weapon have perks like Frenzy, Multi-Kill Clip, and Half Impact Reserves, and again, these are going to be the most solid in my opinion, purely because they are going to be consistent with increasing the damage on the output of this weapon in general. I would obviously pick Frenzy and Half Impact Reserves over Multi-Kill Clip just because they are more consistent and easier to proc, but I do believe Multi-Kill Clip does still have a solid purpose for this weapon, as it do help quite a bit in PvP, just because Frenzy is kind of inconsistent when it comes to the timings and how long you're actually going to be in combat. The magazine on the weapon is actually fairly sized, so I don't think you're going to need any magazines to actually increase the ammunition you have on the weapon, and I think you're just going to be better off going with ricochet rounds, armor-piercing rounds, or high caliber rounds to increase the range, because it does kind of lack range for this weapon in general. With that in mind, for the barrel, I personally think corkscrew rifling is going to be extremely good for you, as it helps with your range and your stability. But if you find the weapon has a little more kick than you can handle, try going for arrowhead break or chambered compensator instead. Next, we're going to take a look at the grenade launcher, the Ignition's Code. This grenade launcher sits in the kinetic slot, but it's a very odd weapon as it does have an extremely strong variety of perks in its pool. However, you're only going to really be able to utilize these perks in their fullest with this weapon with a very limited few. Some of the perks that we're also going to see on this weapon that is a brand new one is known as Blast Radius. Whenever you are surrounded by combatants, it's going to increase your explosion radius for your grenades. This does seem like it could have some benefits, but overall I think it's going to actually lack any real performance increase for the weapon whatsoever. So if we could, I personally believe you need to be avoiding this perk as a whole. But without that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the combinations that we're actually going to be using on this grenade launcher that's going to actually help optimize the performance that you're going to get and unlock the weapon's potential. I think the only perk you can even remotely consider in your third slot is going to be Ambitious Assassin. After the Salvager's Salvo, everybody got a pretty good taste of what Ambitious Assassin has to offer from grenade launchers, with the ability to increase your magazine size from 1 to 2. And that's just a big deal. It's a big deal for the weapon, as all you actually have to do is get kills to essentially double your magazine size, which just isn't hard for you to do. But we take a look over into the fourth slot, and you're going to see that the best perks that you're going to be able to get are going to be Vorpal Weapon or Frenzy. You pair Vorpal Weapon with Ambitious Assassin, and you're obviously going to be able to deal a pretty decent amount of chunk of damage more just by simply killing an ad, reloading your weapon, and proccing Ambitious Assassin, and you're able to just basically blast 2 grenades right in the boss's face. However, if you need something that's more generalized for regular ad clears, you can go with Frenzy. You do still get the proc from your Ambitious Assassin, and the fact that you get a damage bonus on pretty much all the ads around you, as increasing your reload time, you're going to get your double grenades more frequently, therefore obviously helping you output more damage. If you absolutely want to optimize your damage as much as possible, you need to be sure to keep your eyes out for spike grenades if you're able to roll them on the weapon. It's going to further increase your damage output of the weapon whenever you get your grenades on direct hits. Overall, I think the weapon is fairly strong, and I do highly believe that you should consider this weapon, as it could actually be a fairly good solid DPS weapon in the grenade slot. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what my personal favorite weapon of this season is so far, the Chroma Rush. It's a 720 RPM kinetic weapon that's going to sit in your primary slot, and similar to the Grid Skipper, it has the ability to roll some of the new Season 14 perks. So for PvE, hands down, I think Subsistence and Heating Up are going to be your best picks. I have seen a lot of players going for Feeding Frenzy, but the reload on the weapon is already fairly high and it seems extremely unneeded in my personal opinion. Pairing Subsistence or Heating Up with Rampage is going to help you make quick and very easy work of majority of the smaller adds in the activities that you're going to be playing. And a lot of players are going to be going for Feeding Frenzy mainly to pair it with Kill Clip, and with a weapon that has a magazine size of this big, and how short the duration of Kill Clip is, it just doesn't seem very reliable and very consistent to use. If you absolutely want to take the damage a step further with this weapon, running Stasis with the Whisper of Hedron Fragments for the Stasis subclass, you're going to help with your damage and your range significantly. You're going to find that you're able to turn this weapon from its basic pea shooter form into really just a full-blown bullet hose. However, this weapon does have one major downside, and that's the range. With that low of range, it's pretty pathetic. I mean, most of the SMGs that are in the game have more range than that. But you do have the ability to compensate for that in a big way, and that's by using the perk Heating Up while maximizing as many and putting on as many range beneficial perks on this weapon as you can. I mean, you're able to increase the stability by just simply getting kills with the weapon and increasing your damage with Rampage, and even further, again, with using Stasis, and then getting kills on kills just allows you to further increase your stability, and so you're just able to maximize the performance of this weapon overall. But moving on from that, let's go ahead and go over to the Sojourner's Tale. It's a shotgun that's a solar precision frame shotgun, and it has a very strange perk pool. As you can see, the weapon doesn't have the perk Heating Up, but in its place, we're going to see Rapid Hit. And similar to kind of like we mentioned before, Rapid Hit is an extremely strong perk, but you're just not going to be able to get the most out of this perk on a weapon like this. We've had slug shotguns in the game for a while, and so we know what perks are really optimal for this. I mean, Rapid Hit is strong, but auto-loading holster is extremely strong. We're able to go in with a relatively big magazine size, blasting enemies or unloading massive damage into a boss, swapping over to our heavy or a primary, and, you know, dealing out more damage, and then switching back a little bit later and having your magazine completely reloaded, and you're able to maximize as much damage as you're able to put out, just with no breaks in between whatsoever. And the other big issue that you're going to run into whenever using Rapid Hit on this is the simple fact that when you use Rapid Hit, you're obviously going to use your shotgun more. You're going to reload it more, and by using it more, therefore, you're going to end up using all of your ammo quicker, and you're not able to sustain your ammo for a lot of boss fights or heavy adds where it's going to be needed a little more. But looking over into the fourth slot, you're going to see even more different perks like Dragonfly, Killing Wind, Adrenaline Junkie, and Surrounded. I mean, they're all good perks. They really are. But Dragonfly is just not going to be that good on a shotgun that's got massive damage output anyway. Why do we really need Killing Wind for anything other than PvP? And, I mean, they just feel like the performance isn't very well on the weapon, and they just don't feel like they really benefit in the whole. But now we can at least go and take a look over at Frenzy, which will stay active on the weapon while it's stowed away. You combine this with auto-loading holster, and you have the ability to, like we mentioned before, deal out massive, massive damage numbers with your shotgun, put it away, switch over to your heavy, and then pull it back out. Your Frenzy's still going to be active. And let's be honest here, most of the players who are using slug shotguns, you're going to be using them to do massive amounts of DPS to large enemies or bosses. And with that being the case, I can tell you the shotgun is definitely strong. But if your intentions are to use slug shotguns for boss DPSs, in my personal opinion, you're just going to be better off with the godroll of the first and last out arc slug shotgun. It has auto-loading holster, but you're able to pair it with Vorpal weapon. Now let's go ahead and move our attention over to the sidearm, the Farewell. Sidearms aren't very strong in the current build, and I don't think they have been for a pretty decent while, but they are fun to use, and this sidearm is no exception. It sits in the 360 RPM archetype, and it deals kinetic damage, and although the weapon is fun to use, it just feels like it has a case of lost identity and just can't get a good foothold in the current build of the game. And I mean, in the exact same scenario with the Sojourner's Tale, we're going to see perks that are really strong, like Heating Up, Subsistence, and Rangefinder. But when these are actually used on the weapon, they're going to make very little to no difference on the actual performance of this weapon whatsoever. Subsistence recently got a buff, and using Subsistence on different weapons like SMGs and auto rifles, it's fantastic, especially now that the ammo reserves have been brought up. But it's just next to useless on this weapon. Whenever you get kills with this sidearm, it takes several shots, and then on top of that, you're refunded and rewarded with subsistence by only giving you an absolute minuscule amount of ammunition that the ammo it's going to bring back to you with your magazine, you're maybe going to get 1 or 2 additional kills on red bar enemies, and that's just absolutely pathetic. So with that being said, there's only one perk in the third slot that's even remotely worthwhile using, and it's going to be full auto trigger. But on top of the already many flaws with this weapon, taking a look in the fourth slot, we get the very odd greeting of seeing Vorpal weapon there, as if anybody in this game actually intends of using sidearms that already lack damage in the current build on regular enemies, but think you expect us for some reason to use it against stronger boss type enemies or Guardians with their super, expecting this to actually output any form of numbers whatsoever? No. The only fourth slot perk that you're going to find even remotely viable on the weapon is going to either be Frenzy or Multi-Kill Clip, and obviously, Frenzy is just going to be a lot better for you because it's going to be more consistent. I mean, again, Multi-Kill Clip's strong, but you're just not even going to be able to get many kills with the weapon in the first place to be able to utilize Multi-Kill Clip to its full benefit consistent enough to actually impact this gun in any form of positive or beneficial way. As I mentioned before, sidearms are fun. Most of the sidearms are, but this weapon, even compared to how bad sidearms are in the current build, this weapon is just not good. But lastly, let's go ahead and look at the Shattered Cypher. Most of the LMGs in the current build aren't strong either, and it's just, there's nothing about them that makes you want to switch them out for what we've already been using in the meta. And taking a look at a lot of the LMGs that they've given us in the past, it just feels like Bungie's almost too scared to really give these weapons really strong perk combinations, and it just feels like they don't want to push these weapons into the current meta, like they're just afraid they're going to make them too strong. I mean, but this is in a meta where weapons like Anarchy and Eyes of Tomorrow exist. But similar to the other weapons we've talked about this season, we're going to see the exact same stuff here. This LMG sits at the 900 RPM, which you're already just... It's already a big turn away, mainly because you're going to find yourself short of ammo all the time. You're going to be blowing through your rounds really fast, they don't do a ton of damage, and it's just a waste of time. You can kind of combat the ammo shortage with the fact that you can put field prep on the weapon, but doing that, you don't actually get the benefit of heating up, which is really the only other third slot perk on this weapon that's featured that is actually kind of worth your time. And then in the fourth slot, your only real choice is Rampage. Yeah, Surrounded is good, but in situations where you find yourself firefighting a lot of red bar enemies, 99% of the time, I'm just going to use my Iculos SMG because I've got Warmind cells. You can use autoloading holster on the weapon, but again, the weapon just isn't capable of outputting any numbers, so is it really genuinely worth using a weapon that you can deal good amounts of damage to with your sniper or your shotgun, and then switching over, and you're going to find that your other weapon you were using was able to output more? You can get Adrenaline Junkie, and it's going to be able to provide damage and handling for a moderate amount of time, but this perk in general is just not even a perk worth looking at. I mean, taking a look at it and actually realizing Bungie messed up big time on this perk. I mean, it could be useful, it really could, but most players in the game aren't really going for full discipline builds. Bungie severely messed up by placing this in the fourth slot, and by doing that, you're restricting players from being able to pair this with Demolitionist. Not that they even bothered to put that on any of the seasonal weapons this season anyway. I mean, if I had to give an overall score on what I believe all these weapons were worth, it would be extremely hard, and I just don't feel confident or comfortable giving you guys a static rating on a weapon, especially in a game that has a constant shifting meta. The best advice I could personally give you is, if you've got the time or you've got the desire, go farm for the god rolls on all of these weapons, and I say god roll very loosely, more like optimal roll. of what's going to be best for these weapons, because we do have a constant meta shift, and it could be the next big patch or whatever that they decide to buff up 900 RPM LMGs by increasing the ammo reserves and the base ammo that they have to offer, and we see them actually rise up into being a potentially decent DPS weapon in the game. Overall, I would have to say I am disappointed with the weapons that they've put out, as majority of these weapons have counterparts to them that are significantly stronger. I mean, we take a look at the Grid Skipper, but who would actually use the Grid Skipper over several of the pulse rifles that we have currently? Like, when you compare Grid Skipper to the Messenger, or Sojourner's Tale to the first in, last out, I mean, they're just... Even the weapons that are okay, they have better counterparts. I mean, the Chroma Rush is good, and I think it's a little better than the Reckless Oracle, but, I mean, at the same time, with the SMG buffs and stuff coming in, there are just too many other weapons that do outshine a lot of these weapons. Yes, I talked very highly of the Chroma Rush, and I'm praying that Bungie is going to give us a buff to 720 RPM auto rifles that's going to put them in a much more comfortable spot in the game, because there are just too many other weapons that we've already gotten in the game that outshine all of the weapons this season by a long shot. But with that being said, if you don't have the Messenger, or the First and Last Out, or the Swarm, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get these weapons, right? You can get these weapons and use these until something better comes along. My biggest disappointment with these season weapons as a whole is that right now, with how the build is, there are just too many other weapons in the game that are better than these. Yeah, some of them are fun to use, and there's no reason to not use them just to, you know, enjoy yourselves a little bit, but when it comes to actual harder or heavy-hitting enemies, or just tougher activities in general, you're not going to use these. With how the meta currently sits, we're still going to be using snipers for DPS. Slug shotguns have a place, but really it's just for the final boss of the Deepstone Crypt, and that's about it. Auto rifles haven't really been good in a long time, and we just saw a buff to the archetype for 450 RPMs, so why wouldn't you go use Subsistence and Rampage on a weapon that's stronger, like the Gnawing Hunger? Or the Farewell. Why would I use the Farewell when I have access to a 7th Seraph sidearm that I can generate Warmind cells, so I can at least get some kind of consistent ad clear out of it? But on top of the fact that they're introducing weapons that just don't sit well in the season, we're also greeted by a handful of perks where only one of them even seems like it's kind of consistent and remotely usable enough that you would actually want it on any of your weapons. But on top of that, these are strictly on these weapons. And obviously another big issue is, why wouldn't I just go get a weapon that has better damage numbers in the current meta? When none of these perks that you're introducing are available on any of them, what is the point of releasing them? What is the point of having these perks on weapons that are genuinely useless in the current build of the game? But like I said, we are in a constant meta-shifting game, and you can always take it as a subtle hint that the reason they're releasing these weapons, they know that they're not in the most popular or the most powerful archetype, so they may have some intentions in the future to go ahead and vamp these weapons' damage numbers up. But then, of course, you always deal with the good old Bungie's fear of missing out. These weapons could come up in the future. I would encourage you to go farm them so that you don't have to deal with that same fear of missing out that you eventually will if these weapons do get a buff. There are several players that were in the same situation like myself, where we weren't able to get the Fellwinter's Lie because we were just busy that season and didn't really have a lot of desire to play. And we ended up coming back and found that we ended up losing a lot of our engagements in PvP purely because other players played during a time span where the game either wasn't accessible for players, there were players that just weren't into the game at the time yet, or they just didn't play because they didn't enjoy the current build of the game. But regardless, all of these weapons do have potential, and it just depends on what Bungie decides to do for the future of their game. All of these weapons are worth farming, and I highly recommend that you take time to go and farm them. We're going to be in this season for a while, and it's always just fun and enjoyable to go and enjoy new activities and play with the new weapons that are available. But most importantly, if you guys do disagree and you feel that you need to express that, go ahead and do that in the comments below. I'm always open to criticism, and I'm always open to hear other people's insights on these weapons and stuff as well. If you enjoy this kind of content, go ahead and hit the sub button and notification bell if you want to see more of my weapon reviews or guide videos that will be coming out in the future. I hope all of you enjoyed the video, and I appreciate you for stopping by, and I wish you all the absolute best RNG on getting the rolls that you're farming for.